Welcome to the BTS Presents show.
I'm Brian Schulman, I'm the producer. We're currently doing segments on Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley real estate behind the scenes. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Candace Bradfield, broker and owner of Bradfield & Associates, and past president of our Santa Cruz County Association of Realtors. I want to thank you for joining BTS Presents.
We have three panelists who have decided that they'd like to speak a little bit about some different alternatives, perhaps to rent control has the headlines, but there are various factors to affordability, not the least of which being supply and demand. Evan is probably the foremost proponent in the area of perhaps responsible housing supply, and that would include adding some density. So do you want to speak a little bit to your movement? It's the Yimby movement, correct?
Yeah, we're Santa Cruz Yimby. Again, I'd like to iterate that we are not against the rent control initiative, and that is not our focus here. And we have Yimby groups throughout California, and in particular, I like to highlight the Yimby group in the East Bay, who are in support of Costa-Hawkins repeal and rent control. And so we believe, the issue, a lot of it has to do with not enough housing being built. And it's really true in Santa Cruz especially, because during the last 8 years, there's been one housing unit built per every 12 additional people and population growth throughout this county.
Where's that statistic from?
That's from estimates of population and housing units from the California Department of Finance.
Okay.
Yeah. And that has it for every jurisdiction throughout the state. And it's even, places like Cupertino, for example, they've only built 89 housing units in the past 8 years. Meanwhile, they've approved their new Apple campus, which is 10,000 jobs or something. And so there's just a massive imbalance of, we're adding a lot of jobs. California is now the 5th largest economy in the world.
Wow.
And our housing supply is not, increasing. And so the things we're advocating for is, increased capacity through higher zoning and allowing more units to get built. We can't be zoning for only single-family homes nowadays. We need to be allowing minimum accessory dwelling units on every property, but also things like triplexes, fourplexes, and up to 4-story buildings. And in our next to our job centers, we should be building even more densely. And so there's a lot of hurdles that are we need to overcome with our, getting housing approved and built. And so our group is trying to work on all those issues.
Okay. I guess to play advocate for another viewpoint, it's hard to imagine a more dense city than San Francisco, and yet their rents and their affordability is actually worse than ours. So how might we avoid a similar fate? And they, by the way, have rent control.
They do have rent control,
yeah.
And they're also building, 5,000 units every year, or starting to. And so, what I think we really need to focus on is providing the housing for people.
Yeah.
And so, in Santa Cruz County, we're not doing that at all here. And so, up in San Francisco, it's a really similar process, but even more exacerbated because of the jobs imbalance. They added something like 8 jobs per additional housing unit in some recent period of time. And there's a big tech boom, a lot of tech companies moving to San Francisco, but they also have a really complex, challenging housing process where a lot of times only the companies with a lot of patience and ability to wait on land to actually get their project approved are the ones that can stay it out. And as a result, those are, oftentimes luxury housing or nonprofit developers that have an intent-focused mission on actually building, deed-restricted affordable units.
So where does the Yimby movement stand on infrastructure? Say adding another lane to Highway 1.
Yeah, our local group hasn't focused a ton on the infrastructure, but I would say that our housing crisis, in terms of building a lot more homes, that's going to take time. Mm-hmm. And so during that time, we can be planning for these infrastructure increases as well. And so if we're going to be adding a lot more housing, that means we have time to be adding more roadway or better transit is probably better. And then also having more water infrastructure and more efficient and less wasteful water.
And is your focus primarily within the city limits of Santa Cruz City proper, or are you across the county?
We're across the county. We're, I would say, focused in the city of Santa Cruz, but also city of Scotts Valley has a lot of projects coming up. And so
Watsonville as well.
Yeah, Watsonville does. So our members are mainly based in, I'm from up in, currently living up in the Santa Cruz Mountains near Scotts Valley, so that's sort of where.
That's your focus.
Yeah, I focus there, but also down in here in the city of Santa Cruz, and we have a lot of people that live around the city of Santa Cruz as well.
Not to put you on the spot, would you support a rail trail?
That's another issue. It's funny you mentioned. We have people from both sides of that in our Yimby group, and so
you gotta love Santa Cruz.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's another issue that we're focused on housing, and there's some people from our group that think the rail trail will have a lot more capacity for bicyclists, and that'll be sort of a way to deal with our transportation challenges. And then we have other people that think having a train will be a good way to have housing and transit next to each other. So
right, because again, if San Francisco is any indication, logically you would need to have some transportation for people who can't, because everyone wants to be on the west side of Santa Cruz. I don't know if you know of any listings that are available, Peter, but there's not much there. So it would seem that transportation would have to combine with the added supply of housing. But it's tough because we all live here, we all love it for a reason, and what point does Santa Cruz stop being the place that we love? And then you have economic cycles. Peter and I were talking about when at least when I got into the business about 25 years ago, the median price was at about $250, and it's crossed the 900 mark now. So and I know firsthand of places that went up 10 times. So it's. I think it does have to get either a supply answer or a transportation answer to where the supply of workers could come in, or then you get into affordable, basically a living wage conversation. Is it the fault of the free market that the prices are where they are, or is it the fault of the employers that they're not paying the workers enough to be able to afford to live here? So complex stuff. So Peter, you've been unusually restrained. Care to join the conversation in terms of, I guess, density as a solution for affordability?
Well, I think that certainly building more units is an important thing, and doing it in such a way that neighborhoods where people have bought with the expectation of having a single family house, those people, they're never going to support having too much density. And so like with the city of Santa Cruz, we try to do the corridors plan, and as soon as the neighborhood groups get a little up in arms, the city council runs the other way. But I see areas where you could do density. You go downtown Santa Cruz and do density like it's being proposed, and I think that's probably a great idea. It'd bring more people living in the downtown. That means more shoppers downtown. It's an area where there's not people living in single family neighborhoods are going to be freaking out about it. The other thing I've been pushing for quite a while, and I've been surprised that our city council hasn't been willing to lead on this at all, is trying to look at the demand side. And so when UCSC just keeps letting more and more students in, and they're not providing housing for all of them, I've been trying to explain to people, any UCSC student that's let in that's not housed is going to by default push someone else out because they have to live near campus. And so when, especially in the city of Santa Cruz, people are going on and on about this crisis. Well, it's like we're intentionally making this crisis. by letting more and more UCSD students in. And
on campus for a shared room, it's what, $1,200 per student, so you're $2,400 a room without a bathroom. So
it'd
suddenly,
be like paying $4,800 a month for a 2-bedroom in town.
and they are.
Not close to that. They're actually getting a great deal to rent in Santa Cruz versus living on campus. And that's why the students continue to push other people out of Santa Cruz. And so there's this, people are understandably, if they're renters living in Santa Cruz, are very uncomfortable and afraid of losing their housing because this pressure. And the city council has been not willing to step up and say that this has to end.
They did kind of fire a shot across the bow. They said, well, we want a 19,500 limit or whatever, but
an advisory vote that's non-binding. They kicked the can down the road when they could have taken some stronger stances. But most of them have direct ties to the university, people on the council, so they're reticent to do much about it.
tough situation. So, Danette, do you care to join the discussion?
Well, I think that one of the things when I think about Santa Cruz and growing up here is that it's just been such a beautiful bedroom community. Well, it's not going to be sustained that way. We do have to make progress. We do have to make allowance for bigger Apple. Apple could have come here. Apple chose not to come here. And one of the things that I have seen kind of historically, we've had Bob Gibbs come. He's a Harvard developer. He talked about having some of the larger big box stores in our downtown area because there's millions and millions of dollars that students bring in, and we want to capture some of that money. One of the things that can happen around that is if we don't allow it in city proper, they'll go outside the city, then the dollars go outside of our city. But I think in relationship to all of that, I believe that we really have to get comfortable with the idea that we are changing. Santa Cruz is going to change, and that's historically how it's been. That's how it's going to be in the future, and we want to maintain some of this wonderful beachside vibe, but we also have to look at having diversity, among our residents. We can't just have it be this bedroom community for the elite. I mean, personally, I don't want to see that. I love the idea of density housing in the downtown areas and places that will allow that to happen and allow people to continue to live here, whether they're, elders downsizing and need to just be in a city center where they can walk places or ride their bikes or walk their dogs and things of that nature, or if they're young people wanting to live close to, we have some tech startups in Santa Cruz now. So if there are young people wanting to live in our city centers also. So I want to see Santa Cruz be able to grow and have us, like we were talking about in the earlier segment, to kind of bridge that gap in some way. And it's incredibly complex. So I don't have the answers around that. Although I have to say that I am also an advocate of people looking at their lifestyles and thinking in terms of, how can they live simply but well?
Well, speaking as an interior designer, I mean, how many square feet becomes too small? I mean, what's an efficiency unit? I mean, what's an acceptable size? Is it 225 square feet? Is it 250?
Well, 225 square feet is very small.
So what's...
It's very, very small, but on the average, 75% of the populace in the United States wants a bigger home. Because we have this idea of the American dream. For us, that's living in a big, spacious property.
Bigger is
better, with a giant yard. And this might not just be a Santa Cruz problem if we blew it up into a global perspective, right? But that's not what we're talking about right now. So I think that there's a way to navigate that, but it takes both sides coming. And I was interested to hear what Peter was talking about, the city council and some of the behind the scenes and him being connected in that way and bringing ideas and thoughts and possible actions. And then, how do we bridge that? How do we make those things happen? And then you also talking about, the kind of behind the scenes and what's happening in these plans that we might not know about. So it's really, really complex, but I do think that smaller living is probably a piece that's going to happen in our Santa Cruz area for people to have affordable housing.
Yeah, Evan, does the Yimby movement have any studies they've done as far as what people want, as far as a minimum size to feel like they're getting something worth having? Or
Well, our Yimby movement doesn't have as detailed a structure that we would have a research arm on
Okay.
performing these things. Regarding the size of things, one thing that we are watching and pushing for is that at the Santa Cruz County there's a proposed density bonus that's making its way through, and this density bonus is gonna have some language in there that will encourage smaller units and perhaps changing the fee structure for these units to be sort of on per square foot instead of total unit. And by doing that, we're going to be able to allow more units that are somewhat smaller. And these smaller units are by design more affordable or less expensive than a McMansion. So instead of like a 6,000 square foot single family home, maybe we can have a 10 unit 600 square with each with 600 square feet. And so we're looking to get those kinds of things be made possible.
Well, it's an interesting concept, and I think those in public service enter that sector because they want to make a difference. But unfortunately, government is such a slow-moving machine that very often I think the laws that get passed are sometimes, I don't want to say too little too late, because sometimes they're too much, but again, too late. So my fear is that we have a repeat of what happened in 1980, where we had rent control passed throughout the Bay Area around the same time when interest rates were at 18-20% and a huge housing market crash happened. Rents went down, and then as the recovery started to happen, because rents were controlled, they couldn't naturally recover, and so a lot of people were driven out of the rental business or just basically threw up their hands and said, well, we can't afford to fix these places up.
That was for a few cities, though. There's not every city in California has rent control, and I'd say most cities do not, as far as I'm aware.
Right. No, but the damage was most, and I think Costa-Hawkins stemmed more from what happened in the cities that did have the rent control because they weren't getting any supply. And so Costa-Hawkins is pro-supply, which does align with your vision, I believe.
We have no position on Costa-Hawkins. We are more focused on other issues relating to producing supply. And our movement is Yimby, which is a counter to NIMBYs.
Right.
And so we've seen, and if you go to some public meetings, even on the proposed campus housing, there are people that are even opposed to housing on the campus of UCSC. Things that were
That sounds insane.
So that's what we're all about. And
So where do the people live? If you're going to bring 10,000 students in the next 5-10 years, where are they going to live?
Well, we sure hope that more people on campus, more housing on campus is going to be constructed, and I think that the area right below the campus should be denser, and we should be allowing denser housing along the transit lines that go up to the campus. And in fact,
So you're saying like where the cows are currently?
that is where one of those sites is being proposed currently. But I'm saying also the neighborhoods around there too.
I see.
The existing area. And our organization at the state level had legislation this year that would have mandated a minimum, maximum height and lower parking requirements and less regulations on floor area requirements around high quality transit. In the first draft of our bill, this would have applied to the entirety of the area along bus route 16, which goes between downtown Santa Cruz and the campus. So I think we need to be looking at things like that, where we have homeowners that are looking to maybe sell or develop their property to a little denser use, and maybe with our density bonuses you can get some affordable units in there as well, and just provide more housing for the demand.
Yeah, it's complex issues. Other cities that have, Mountain View, for example, looked at changing their affordable housing requirements and very quickly found that by raising it from 20% to 40%, they frightened off the developers. And so they came to a compromise of, I think it was 22%. They raised it by 10%, which, baby steps. So I think anything that gets done, whether it's a proposal on rent control or density bonuses and those sorts of things, always needs to be looked at. And government doesn't necessarily think of things the same way that a business person does, but they need to take that into into account. How does a property owner think of it? What's a logical property owner going to do? And Peter and I hear a lot from the front lines, and I've heard estimates as high as another 50 rental houses and small duplexes, things like that, going on the market in the next month or two. I know firsthand. I've been asked to evaluate about 5. And if those all went and got bought and turned into second homes, then our vision of having more affordable rentals have gone out the window. So, Peter, do you want to speak a little bit where you are on this?
Yeah, I think the thing it's unfortunate is a lot of these people that are advocating for housing one way or another, or for tenants' rights, for moving for housing justice. A lot of these people haven't taken the time to sit down with someone that's actually going to develop housing and look through, like, what does that person face, the hurdles they face, why aren't they building more housing right now even though rents are so insanely high, and
why is that?
Well, I think the biggest hurdle is regulatory, that you can't, which Yimby is trying to address in many areas, is that you're not allowed to do it, or you're not allowed to do as densely as you'd like to, or you can't do it in certain areas, that there's setbacks and parking, and on and on and on, so that it becomes so that doing anything meaningful with the properties is very hard, if not impossible, to make pencil out. And then you have people that are the NIMBY groups that don't want it in a lot of areas. They kill things like the corridors plan, so that the areas where that potentially you can have density, it's a lot fewer than you would have otherwise. But I think, especially with regards to this rent control initiative, these people don't understand. They've never sat down with the developer to look at the mindset of what the developer is thinking. And I've already had several clients that were looking to do projects in the city of Santa Cruz, and they see this initiative, and they turn tail and they run. Right. And they're not coming back to Santa Cruz, and they're not going to be providing housing in Santa Cruz, and they're not interested in doing projects in Santa Cruz because the risk is too high. If they build these projects and they get halfway through and all of a sudden we have this rent control initiative and Costa-Hawkins gets repealed, they're in the middle of investing huge amounts of money into a project that's not going to even pencil out and potentially lose them a lot of money. And there's, with these huge lag times, they can't be taking projects on that are risky. They have to make sense. Right. And so as a result, these people don't realize what they're doing is they're discouraging people from bringing housing. A little bit, I was surprised. I met with Robert Singleton to talk to him about Yimby, and I just assumed that Yimby would be like completely against rent control, because if you talk to developers and people that are trying to build more housing, and it seemed pretty obvious to me, you sit down with economists and go through it, that's not the way they go about it. The way they go about it is to address supply and demand, and I like that Yimby is at least working on the supply side.
Yeah, that's good. And Danette, you stage homes and apartments and things like that, both for efficient living and for trying to get the seller a premium price. So one might say that you're responsible for the runaway housing prices. Obviously, that's not entirely accurate, but can you speak a little bit more to the impact that properly staging something has? Is it helping somebody get a vision of what it's going to be like, or?
Well, sure. I mean, the whole point of staging the home is to have someone walk in and feel like that could be their home. So, of course, it's bare of any personal effects if the people are still living in the home. I go in there and just beautify that, maybe using some of the things that they have, but we take out all their personal effects. There's no photographs and things of that nature. But if it's a home that has nothing in it, I just stage it so that it looks like when someone walks in, it's like I could be sitting here and reading my book, sitting in the sun. Or
so maybe if you're talking about a 225 square foot or a 300 square foot space, the role of somebody like you might become a lot more important, all laughing matters aside, to really help people visualize what it would be like to productively live in a space like that if necessary.
Absolutely. I think that it's really true, and I'm certainly personally an advocate just for helping people to get rid of the things that no longer serve them. I mean, that's a service that could be utilized by any realtor in our town or any other town in the nation, because people, when there's a time where they start thinking about putting the home on the market, and then the time that they actually get the home on the market. And during that time frame, as you know, moving is one of the most stressful things that we can do, right? So helping them clear that out and get a vision. And yeah, of course, part of the staging is so that they can get top dollar. And in Santa Cruz, people are willing to pay $100,000 more than asking price and up in some cases.
But in a down market as well, lest we forget, this town hasn't always had runaway prices. There was a lot of foreclosures, short sales, so it could help with all of those. We're running towards the end of our segment. I wanted to give each of our guests an opportunity to speak up briefly about any other remaining issues that you feel you'd like to voice at this time, starting with you.
Yeah, well, we're Santa Cruz Yimby, and we're just trying to get more housing built and trying to figure out what the issues preventing enough housing for our growing population.
Did you want to talk about the vacation houses at all? No, you're good. Okay. Yeah. Peter?
Peter Cook, LightHouse Realty, and I'd just like to encourage everybody to go join www.santacruztogether and become educated about this rent control initiative. They are going to be fighting this in the ballot come November, and making sure that this particular initiative doesn't pass. But I don't think it stops there, because there are a lot of smart housing providers in that group that have some really good solutions for how we could help tenants and make it so that it's not such a difficult place to rent. And it's just, I think, really unfortunate that it's currently flawed initiatives being pushed without having talked to people ahead of time. So.
And then Danette, if somebody wants to get their life in order, how might they best reach you?
Danette Lawrence, EyeDesignHouse, staging, consulting, and streamlining. You can check me out at www.EyeDesignHouse.com. EyeDesignHouse.
And I think that wraps it up for us. Thank you for your perspective, each of you. And the debate rages on. What's the solution? And until we find that answer, we're going to keep talking about it. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
I'm Brian Schulman. Thanks for watching the BTS Presents show.
The damage is done, and you see that you were wrong. You wake up wondering just how I've done. While I've done all right. Yes, there are some girls, but I drive their own side.
I'm Datta, broker and owner of Main Street Realtors. Thanks for joining us.